Good morning once again, my brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ. Here we are for another Living Hope Today study. What a blessing it is to be with you one more time to open the book. Today we find ourselves in Numbers chapter 8. And it's an amazing chapter. I'm going to try to tie it to the New Testament a little bit for you as we proceed. But this is a chapter that says God has specific requirements for the people that are going to serve him at the tabernacle, the Levites. All right, now, we just crossed a huge threshold at the end of chapter 7. I don't know if you recall it. In fact, let me just bring it back to you for a quick review. At the end of chapter 7, all the tribes have given what God has asked them to give to have the tabernacle function as God requires. And at the end of the chapter, the 89th verse, very long chapter, it says, when Moses entered the tent of meeting to speak with the Lord, he heard the voice speaking to him from between the two cherubim above the atonement cover on the ark of the testimony, and he spoke with them. So you see these two cherubim, they're on top of the cover. Now the presence of God, the voice of God, is not up on the top of Mount Sinai. Now the voice of God, through all the things he's put the Israelites through to make this possible, the voice of God is now speaking in the tabernacle, in the Holy of Holies, the most holy place, right there on the cover of the Ark of the Testimony. So God's presence is now in the camp. His voice is audibly heard. All right, as God prepares from there, he says, look, the Lord said to Moses, speak to Aaron and say to him, when you set up the 7 lamps, they are to light the area in front of the lampstand. So we have a lampstand and we have lamps to go with it. I'll show you that in a minute. Aaron did so. He set up the lamps so that they faced forward on the lampstand, just as the Lord commanded Moses. This is how the lampstand was made. It was made of hammered gold. From its base to its blossoms, the lampstand was made exactly like the pattern the Lord had shown Moses. Well, if you recall from Exodus chapter 25, there's an artist's rendering of what the lampstand might have looked like. But let me take you to the New Testament. Listen to Hebrews 9. It's very important to get the correlation between the old and the new. I think it'll help us a lot to understand what God is setting up long term by giving all these regulations and rituals to the Israelites here in Numbers. Now, the first covenant had regulations for worship and also an earthly sanctuary. So the author's telling us we're under the old covenant in Numbers, and it has an earthly sanctuary. That's the tabernacle. A tabernacle was set up. In its first room were the lampstand, the table, and the consecrated bread. This was called the holy place. You remember we saw an image of the tabernacle and how it's divided. So this is the holy place. But behind the second curtain was a room called the most holy place, which had the golden altar of incense and the gold-covered ark of the covenant. This ark contained the gold jar of manna, Aaron's staff that had budded, and the stone tablets of the covenant. So just understand, when we get to the New Testament, and we'll see a little bit more of that in a minute, when we get to the New Testament, God is going to correlate what we're hearing about in Leviticus, Numbers, the Torah. He's going to bring us to a fulfilling place where we see that Jesus himself brings fulfillment to that whole section. All of this stuff will have relevance based on what happens in Hebrews in the New Testament. The Lord said to Moses, take the Levites from among the other Israelites and make them ceremonially clean. So now it's time to prepare the Levites to serve in the temple. To purify them, do this. Sprinkle the water of cleansing on them, then have them shave their whole bodies and wash their clothes, and so purify themselves. Have them take a young bull with its grain offering. Okay, we're going to just keep track of all the offerings mentioned in this passage. Here's a grain offering of fine flour mixed with oil. Then you are to take a second young bull, for a sin offering. Okay, so these priests are going through the same things that they will be administering as the function of the tabernacle begins. Bring the Levites to the front of the tent of meeting and assemble the whole Israelite community. Now, you know that's a lot of people, perhaps up to over 1 million people. You are to bring the Levites before the Lord, and the Israelites are to lay their hands on them. So there's some sort of a service about to take place. Aaron is to present the Levites before the Lord as a wave offering. All right, so here's the third offering mentioned: a grain offering, sin offering, wave offering from the Israelites, so that they may be ready to do the work of the Lord. After the Levites lay their hands on the heads of the bulls, use one for a sin offering to the Lord and the other for a burnt offering. There's another offering mentioned to make atonement for the Levites. Now, this is a great contrast with the New Testament. Here, the priest has to be atoned for before he can function as he's called to function as a priest. We'll see the contrast when we go back to Hebrews 9. Have the Levites stand in front of Aaron and his sons, and then present them as a wave offering to the Lord. In this way, you are to set the Levites apart from the other Israelites, and the Levites will be mine. So the Lord is saying, I am consecrating, dedicating, purifying these Levites to be mine alone. All right, they belong to me. Quite a honor that's just magnificent, that this tribe of Israelites would be set apart for the Lord himself. After you have purified the Levites and presented them as a wave offering, they are to come to do their work at the tent of meeting. I mean, this is quite a responsibility, right? The Lord has claimed you as his own, and now you're going to serve him by doing what he requires at the tabernacle. They are the Israelites who are to be given wholly to me. He says it again. I have taken them as my own in place of the firstborn, the first male offspring of every Israelite woman. And then the Lord explains that. He says, every firstborn male in Israel, whether man or animal, is mine. When I struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, I set them apart for myself, right? He didn't strike down the firstborn of those who obeyed the rules of the Passover and had the blood of the lamb on their doorposts when the angel of death passed over. Now he says, instead of those firstborn, I'm keeping the Levites, and I have taken the Levites in place of all the firstborn sons in Israel. Of all the Israelites, I have given the Levites as gifts to Aaron and his sons to do the work at the tent of meeting on behalf of the Israelites. And so here's the work. They do all the things in terms of the rituals, but the main purpose, to make atonement for the people, so that no plague will strike the Israelites when they go near the sanctuary, so they won't come under judgment when they come into God's presence. Moses, Aaron, and the whole Israelite community did with the Levites, just as the Lord commanded. That's another amazing verse. We don't hear that often, but here we have total obedience. The Levites purified themselves and washed their clothes. Then Aaron presented them as a wave offering before the Lord and made atonement for them to purify them. They went through all the things God said. After that, the Levites came to do their work at the tent of meeting under the supervision of Aaron and his sons. They did with the Levites just as the Lord commanded Moses. And the Lord said to Moses, this applies to the Levites. Oh, here we're going to have age restrictions announced for the workers, for the Levites. Men 25 years old or more, so that's the minimum age, shall come to take part in the work at the tent of meeting. And please consider the kind of work these guys do. Yeah, they're in charge of moving things whenever God decides to move his people. Okay, we saw that in previous chapters, but they're also basically butchers. They're sacrificing animals daily, killing animals, cutting them up in certain ways. I mean, this is really heavy work. Okay, so here's a 25-year-old. If you're 25 or older, you can be part of that. God also says, but at the age of 50, they must retire from their regular service and work no longer. So that's when you're out. And honestly, that kind of heavy work, maybe that's as long as you can take it. Let's see. They may assist their brothers in performing their duties at the tent of meeting, but they themselves must not do the work. This then is how you are to assign the responsibilities of the Levites. Okay, so now we see that that's what the Levites are doing. That's what they're all about. I want to take you to Hebrews chapter 9 and just listen in light of what we just read, how the New Testament brings us to fulfillment in this. Hebrews 9:11. When Christ came as high priest of the good things that are already here, he went through the greater and more perfect tabernacle that is not man-made, that is to say, not a part of this creation. Okay, so the first distinction, he goes through a perfect tabernacle. What would that be? Well, most likely they're talking about his own body, the perfect man, the man that is God himself, the one who has never sinned, is totally pure without blemish or fault. All right, he went through the greater. It's better than the tabernacle. More perfect. It's more perfect than the tabernacle. It's not man-made. The tabernacle was man-made. That is to say, it's not part of this creation. It wasn't made by man, okay? He did not enter, here you go, by means of the blood of goats and calves, but he entered the most holy place once for all by his own blood, having obtained eternal redemption. Now, just park on that for a second and think about it. What is required for the priests, the Levites, to enter into the Holy of Holies or the most holy place for the high priest? What's required? Well, the animals, innocent animals, are shedding blood. They're butchering them. They're sacrificing them. They're having burnt offerings and sin offerings and grain offerings and wave offerings and fellowship offerings. They're doing all kinds of ritualistic things to gain the atonement necessary to be in the presence of God. Here we see that Christ doesn't go in to the Holy of Holies, the most holy place. He doesn't go in because some animal has been sacrificed. He goes in because he himself, the perfect Lamb of God, has been sacrificed. Do you see how he fulfills the whole Old Testament system through his own death, his own sacrifice on the cross? He obtains eternal redemption. So the blood of goats and bulls and the ashes of a heifer sprinkled on those who are ceremonially unclean sanctify them so that they are outwardly clean. That's what we're looking at in Numbers, these rituals, right? God brings them from ceremonially unclean to clean through these rituals. But how much more? Here's the contrast. Then will the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself unblemished to God. He is the perfect sacrifice. How much more will he cleanse our consciences from acts that lead to death, so that we may serve the living God? The point, the sacrifice of Jesus Christ fulfills the whole sacrificial system, and he accomplishes, he is efficacious, or he's able to completely accomplish what that whole Old Testament system stood for. Only he does it perfectly. It was imperfectly accomplished in the Old Testament. All that ritual, all those sacrifices at the tabernacle, the blood of bulls and goats does not redeem from sin. But God did what we call typology. He set that up so that when his Lamb of God came to earth and was sacrificed on a cross, we would see the connection. And the perfect, unblemished Lamb of God dies so that salvation is accomplished perfectly and forgiveness is granted perfectly through the work that Christ does. Old Testament, we're in the Old Covenant. New Testament, salvation has been completely accomplished through Christ's death and resurrection, and the new covenant is established. That's where you, as a believer in Jesus Christ, live today, in the new covenant, completely forgiven. That's why we need to serve him well today, church. God bless you.
Who is it who for sinners shed his blood, and now for cleansing all can pluck